Let's bring in Kyle from the Menard Studio Hotline.
Okay.
Kyle Rodriguez from ColtsAuthority.com. Kyle, how you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. I made the mistake of scheduling a filling this morning, so my mouth's still a little numb, but I think I can power through it.
Doing that little dribble drool thing out of the corner of your mouth, are you, Kyle?
Well, we'll get through it. It'll just make it that much more entertaining, I think.
I always like it when you chew on your lip, man. That's what works the best. You get to chewing and gnawing on your lip, don't even know it. That's cool.
Well, let's start
I know,
here.
that's what I'm worried about. I was afraid to eat when I was just going to chomp down on it, and then I'm going to wake up tomorrow with a sore jaw either way.
Well, if at any point during this conversation you look down and there's blood dripping on the table, you let us know and we'll cut it short if we need to, all right? So,
you got to play through injury. That's right.
That's right. Rub some dirt on it, brother. Let's
late
move.
in the season, man. Everybody's hurt right now. All right, well, let's get started, Kyle, with just overall thoughts on yesterday's game against the Bengals.
Well, what a good way to start the postseason. I mean, for Indianapolis, I know, if you're an unbiased viewer, it probably wasn't the most fun game to watch, but for Evansville residents and Indiana residents and Colts fans, it was great. You talk so much about the momentum heading into the postseason and blah blah blah, and it's one of those narratives. But really, you look at the postseason, and a lot of times it really doesn't matter. From a coaching perspective, from a player perspective, you want to be playing well. But once you get into the postseason, anything can happen. And you look at this Colts team. Obviously ended the season not on a hot streak like they were in the middle of the season, playing so well in that 6-game win streak, and not so much to end the season. And the Bengals, they really finished the season playing well. They had that big win against Denver. The run game was going really well. But, you come into Indianapolis, and the same strengths of the Colts were the same, matched up the same way against the Bengals as they did in that Week 7 matchup. The Bengals couldn't get the run game going outside of that early starts. Andrew Luck was just the difference between Andrew Luck and Andy Dalton was just magnified. And the Colts just controlled the game throughout. They did have a few turnovers and mistakes that kept the game close, but for the most part, the Colts were clearly the better team.
Now, we started the show today, Kyle, and I'm a big Colts fan, and I've been very critical of the team over the last 4 weeks because, in my opinion, it was deserved because they just did not look good throughout the month of December, especially the Cowboys game, and you can go back to the Patriots game, and like you just mentioned, there was that final stretch of games there. They just did not look all that great, and I've got some flack from it on Facebook and Twitter. But it's almost because I care too much, Kyle. I think that's my problem. I just care too much. I want to see them do well because, and again, I've said this for the last couple of weeks. Please prove me wrong. And you're right, though. They played well yesterday. I started the show by saying I was happy. They got the run game going with Boom Herron. Luck looked good. No turnovers yesterday. Defensively, they looked well. Special teams was pretty good yesterday. But I wanted to take it with a grain of salt because it was the Bengals. And because of the fact that they were missing A.J. Green and Jermaine Gresham, and then they lose Monaluga halfway through, and he's a big run stopper for them. With that in mind, are you still happy with the performance of the team despite what they went up against yesterday? Because obviously it just gets tougher from here on out.
Right, and I think offensively I definitely am. I think you look now back at that streak at the end of the season, and especially you look at the play calling and what was going on there. I think, you keep the Bengals game in context and you keep the rest of the season in context. I think you have to look at those, that last 4 games more as almost a trial period for some of the things they were trying to do as an offense. They didn't have the same game plan. They weren't running the vertical routes like they were yesterday or they were in the middle of the season. They weren't, forcing that ball down the field quite as much. Obviously, the run game yesterday helps, and they're not going to face a run defense that's quite as weak as the Bengals throughout the rest of the playoffs. But in terms of the passing offense, in terms of Andrew Luck, in terms of the offensive game plan as a whole, obviously you saw Boom Herron being the workhorse and not a guy like Trent Richardson, not trying to force the run but using it as a complement. I mean, I just think they really had a good mix going, and I think that's more like what we're going to see rather than what we saw in December. Defensively, I do think you have to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt because the Bengals, they were the team that the Colts could handle in the middle of the season, and they're still the same team offensively. Even with A.J. Green, I don't think that game changes a ton from an offensive perspective for the Bengals. The Colts' strengths just match up so well with the Bengals' weaknesses. Andy Dalton doesn't handle pressure. He doesn't handle stunts very well. The Colts, that's really the only thing they can do. They can stunt, they can blitz, and they can rely on that man coverage from their defensive backs. and the Bengals they match up really well. So I don't think you're going to see the same thing from the rest of the teams in the postseason, because the other quarterbacks in the postseason, they do handle the blitz pretty well. So, yeah, they're going to need to really step up, especially from a pass rush perspective. They really didn't get much pressure on Dalton. But other than that, I mean, I'm happy with the performance. I mean, it's a playoff win, and I don't think anytime you get that, you can't take away from them too much.
Well, Trent Richardson yesterday battling an illness. I don't know, maybe the flu bug thing, whatever that's going around. Everybody's getting hit with that. But it's a game-time decision, but he was active. He was on the sideline, had a helmet on, but we never seen him come in the game. Do you was that just more the way the game played out, or do you see a little more into that than him just not getting on the field?
I think it's a little more. I mean, obviously the with an illness, the flu, whatever it was for him, I think it played a little bit of a part. He did. I mean, they put him in the game for one snap. Late in the game, it was the Reggie Wayne third down conversion. I think he was in for just the one snap. So I don't really, if he's really sick, if he's really in a case where we just don't want to play him too much, then I mean, why even have him active? Why have him on the sideline and put him in for a snap? I don't get it. I think it did play a bit of a part, but for the most part, I think Boom Herron's, their guy, fumbles and everything. If he continues to fumble the ball, I think you're definitely going to see more Tipton and more Richardson, but I think Herron's the guy, and I think that's the way it should be going forward. When
this season ends, which hopefully is about a month away, but do you see the Colts trying to move Richardson, Bradshaw, Herron come in at RB1, and maybe they look at drafting a running back in second round or something? Or what do you see happening with this running back core they have?
I would not be surprised at all to see them draft a running back. I think they probably should. I don't know how high they should, but you look at Herron. Obviously, I think he is who he is. He's a decent back. He's a good back, but I don't know if he's a long-term guy. Richardson pretty clearly isn't. I don't know if they're going to be able to move him or even cut him. His contract's guaranteed. I don't know that it's going to help them to I don't know if anybody's going to take his contract in terms of a trade or anything like that. And cutting him, doesn't really do him any good. He's still a body that they can use. They just have to be realistic about how much production they're going to get from him. So I do think they still need to look for a long-term guy. Maybe bring Bradshaw back on another short contract. But, you take his injury history into consideration. And like I said, you still going to need to get that long-term guy. So wouldn't be surprised at all if they drafted a guy or signed another guy instead of Bradshaw, in free agency, another veteran. You look at a guy like, maybe even a guy like, and I'm just throwing this out there, but like C.J. Spiller or something like that, who's, had some disappointment, but a guy they think that they can bring in and get production out of. Because, you look at their history in free agency, they like those guys, Bradshaw, Hakeem Nicks, DHB last year. So wouldn't be surprised at all to see that, but I definitely think they make some kind of addition.
Talking to Kyle Rodriguez, ColtsAuthority.com, also a featured columnist on Bleacher Report. Let's look ahead here over the next minute or two here, Kyle, before we let you go. Look ahead to Sunday's game at Denver. Obviously, it's going to be a tough game for the Colts, as they have already seen Denver once in Denver to start the season. It was a 7-point loss then. I know that Denver's favored by a touchdown coming up this weekend. I had mentioned earlier when we got things started here a half hour, 45 minutes ago, that the lack of Jermaine Gresham by the Bengals not being there, I think to some degree could have been maybe a bigger loss for the Bengals than maybe A.J. Green, because I think Vontae Davis would have done a pretty good job against A.J. Green. But the Colts just have not they struggle against good tight ends. And obviously Denver does have a very good, one of the better tight ends in the league in Julius Thomas. Plus, they've got a running game that's been running pretty good here over the last few weeks with C.J. Anderson. How do you see, and what do you think the game? Do you think they stick to a similar game plan as they did against the Bengals, or do you throw that out the window and you got to start all over because you're facing a completely different team with completely different strengths and weaknesses?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to just kind of throw it out. Peyton, I mean, he's unlike any quarterback in the league, and I mean, we know that. We've seen it for years. But, you've got that running game now, which is a little different than when they faced them the first time around. Julius Thomas is so good. I'm not sure, what his role is going to be in this game, just because he's been hampered by injuries throughout the second half of the season. So that's going to be interesting. And the big thing is going to be, the balance that Denver's found, and if the Colts are going to be able to figure that out. The Patriots had that great balance against them earlier in the season, and they couldn't figure it out, and they got killed. even Pittsburgh had a good balance with Bell being healthy. They couldn't figure that out. So it's the teams of balance that really give the Colts trouble. If it's a one-dimensional team, they can game plan pretty well, but they just don't have, the dynamic talent, both in the front seven and the back four, to be able to handle that balance. So it's going to be a tough matchup, absolutely, for them defensively. And they're not going to get the same kind of support. Well, Andrew Luck's not going to get the same kind of support as he did against Cincinnati. He's not going to get a defense that holds the other team to 10 points. He's not going to get a running game that's quite as successful. So the big pressure for me is going to be on Luck again. Obviously, you have the Manning-Luck comparisons and all that. But, he's just not going to get that same kind of support. He's going to need to have another, basically what was a flawless game against Cincinnati. He's going to have another game like that to be able to carry them, going forward in the playoffs. They're going to make another, run.
One last question for you, Colin. We'll let you go. Will Pep Hamilton be a head coach somewhere next season?
Whew, man, I wish all the best for Pep, and I hope he gets a head coach at some point. But at this point, I don't really, you don't want him to go after the season he's had. He's had some issues with the Colts, especially last season. But ever since that Week 2 loss in Philadelphia, I really think he's done a great job. Like I said, the play calling this week was phenomenal. Him and Luck obviously have a good rapport there. But, you look at the team and how much turnover they've had in the coaching staff, at least offensively, with Arians leaving and then Hamilton coming in. You just don't want to have a third offensive coordinator in 4 years. So, I hope Pep will. I think Pep will get a job eventually, and he might get an offer this year. But, man, for the Colts' sake and for Luck's sake, I really hope they can have some consistency there from year to year.
Well, I think I heard something, not to interrupt, I think I heard something that Pep was interviewed with the Raiders maybe last night or this morning.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? I
saw that, too.
Yeah, okay. All right, yeah, so he's out there, yeah.
Well, Kyle, thanks for the time. Appreciate you fighting through the filling for us today. Kyle Rodriguez, ColtsAuthority.com. Also find him on BleacherReport.com and on Twitter. A great follow, especially on game day and throughout the week for all your Colts information. That's Kyle's at ColtsAuth, AUTH_ Kyle. You need something a little catchier, Kyle. ColtsAuth _ Kyle doesn't roll off the tongue.
I know I do. I know it. It's an issue every time.
Appreciate the time, Kyle. Thanks again. Hope we can talk again soon.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Thanks, Kyle.
See ya.